Now, I think we can all agree that the creatures in Subnautica can be fascinating when it comes to both lore and appearance. But let's be real here, not every single Subnautica creature is made equal. In fact, whereas some are incredibly interesting, others are kinda just there, looking cool nevertheless, but there isn't much information about them. And well, today, I'll be making the official ranking of all creatures in Subnautica, well, more or less, in terms of their lore. And we'll be doing this, of course, using the well-known tier maker. Now, I know I'm about half a year late to this tool, but oh well, nevertheless, I haven't seen anyone make a tier list quite like this out there yet. And I was inspired by Aki making a very similar thing pretty recently, which, by the way, you should definitely go check his channel out if you enjoy my content. So without any further ado, let's hop right in. Now, in this already pre-made tier list, which really good job on making it, by the way, we're starting us off with the Amoeboid. Now, this thing dwells solely in the Lost River, and it is essentially like about as close to a plant as you can get. I mean, it's barely a creature to begin with. There is no real interesting lore about it, besides the fact that it reproduces about the same way as cells do. It just eats food and then splits into two when it's adult. So for now, we're basically going to put it into the no real lore category, which I should probably explain the categories as well to begin with. Basically here, we're ranking it based on how much interesting stuff there is about something. Now, if something ends in the no real lore category, that doesn't mean that there is no information on it. It just means that there is nothing particularly interesting about it. And also, of course, that doesn't make it uncool. It just means that it doesn't really have a lot of relevance to the story and what's happening. Next on our list is the biter. Now, these things are kind of interesting, at least in some regard, given the fact that they have an antennae that can sense any bodily fluids in the water, and they can apparently outswim all of their competition due to the overgrown tail fin. But other than that, they are just kind of annoying, and that's really it to it. But, you know, given everything and the fact that they are incredibly strong and can overwhelm big prey, I'm gonna put them into the some lore can be found category. Now, next up is the bleeder, perhaps one of the most disturbing creatures in the game. And again, these things have a little bit of lore to be found about them, most specifically to how they feed on the victim's bodily fluids, how they attach, and how they can transform their body to attach better. But at the end of the day, again, there isn't really that much to them. The animation of them trying to attach to the sea moth is pretty cool, but I'm just gonna plop them into the 1 or 2 cool facts, because really there isn't that much. Alright, and next on our list is the blighter. Now, this thing is basically just a deeper existing version of the biter. There is some interesting lore there specifically to how they evolved and how some of their organs no longer function the same way as they do with the biter. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much the same creature, and with examples like this, I'm just gonna put them into the same category. And next up is the blood crawler. Now, these things are essentially the exact same as their land counterparts, except for the fact that they are maybe a little bit more interesting due to their size, but really there is no real lore about them. Maybe some interesting stuff about their legs, but for the purposes of this list, I'm just gonna put them into the no real lore. And next up is the Spinefish. This one is basically the exact same thing. There might be 1 or 2 cool facts about it, but I'm just gonna put it into the no real lore category, because again, it doesn't really have any relevance to the story. And the facts that are there, I just don't think are really that interesting, so here we go. But now we're finally getting to something more interesting. The bone shark is next on our list. Now, these things are definitely dangerous and also interesting from a lore perspective. Mainly, I would say, due to their armor plating and how it could possibly relate to the skeletons found down in the Lost River. Now, because of that, and because of the fact that they are probably related to the larger Leviathans, I'm actually going to put them into the interesting lore and relevant to the story, even though, let's be honest, there isn't enough there to put them into the top tier category. Next up is the Boomerang, and about this one, unfortunately, I don't have much more to say, besides the fact that it is an edible creature, so that is nice for you, I guess, if you're hungry in the world of Subnautica. And hey, I guess it's cool that it is only active during the day, but other than that, there's nothing really there. But since it is only active during the day, I'm still gonna put it into the 1 or 2 cool facts. And next up is the cave crawler. Now, these things, I'm gonna be honest with you, I think they should probably be put into the 1 or 2 cool facts, because they are more interesting than the blood crawler itself. Yes, I said that if it's basically the same creature, I'm going to be putting them in the same category, but at least these things are more prominent on land, which makes them inherently interesting. And on top of that, chances are they ate a lot of the Aurora survivors, so that's definitely something to warrant them at least a higher tier. And next on our list is the crab snake, and I'm gonna have to start speeding through these a little bit more here. Now, these are definitely cool because of their interaction with the jelly shroom cave and the mushrooms in there, which I think is enough to put them into the some lore to be found category. Now for the crab squid, this one is somewhat relevant to the story because, as you may or may not know, there are some suggestions and some hints to the fact that it may have taken care of Paul Torgal from the Degassi crew. And that most definitely puts it into at least this category, if not higher up. Now, the Crashfish is an interesting one because the lore about it is really not that fascinating, but the way it acts and how it interacts with the environment is definitely cool. And because of that, I'm gonna put it into the 1 or 2 cool facts category, but not really any higher. Now here is the god tier Cuttlefish. Now if this was a list of just how cool creatures are, this would definitely be S tier, like top level, all the way up there. But when it comes to actual lore, it's not like there is that much about it. It is fascinating, don't get me wrong. First of all, we don't really know where it comes from in terms of the planet. It's not from 4546b. It could be an alien experiment, and there are some crazy theories out there about it. So, you know what? Okay, changed my mind. I think it is probably good enough to put it into the top tier lore, mainly due to the fact that there are so many theories out there about it. Next up is the II. Once again, there isn't really much to say about it, so I'm just gonna put it into the no real lore category. Next up are the floaters. Now the floaters can certainly be interesting, and into this category I'm also going to put the giant floaters or the ancient floaters. But besides the fact that they interact with their environment in a cool way and that they can send your Seamoth into the stratosphere, there really isn't much about them, so 1/2 cool facts it is. The Gary fish will most definitely suffer a very similar fate going into the no real lore category because there just isn't much to say there, which in retrospect, to be honest, probably means that the Boomerang should have been in the same category as well. Now for the Gastropods, they are actually kind of interesting, not just for their appearance, but also for the way they have developed their defense and the fact that they are one of the most damaging things in the game. But other than that, again, there isn't a whole lot of lore about them, definitely not enough to be in this category, so I'm gonna put them into 1 or 2 cool facts category. Now we're on to the Ghost Leviathan. Now all Leviathans are inherently interesting because of how they interacted with the creatures in the Lost River, and because of where they are found in the map. Now this thing is out there in the void, and I think that creates big connections to what kind of creatures live out there in the void, what the life cycle of this creature is, its interaction with the Lost River and the tree down there, and in general I think there is definitely enough here to put it into the top tier category and make it an S rank. Now next up is the Ghost Ray, definitely a very cool looking creature, the flesh of which is actually poisonous, only really found deep in the game. However, besides the fact that it occupies one of the coolest areas in the game, there isn't really much about it, so I'm simply going to put it into the 1 or 2 cool facts category. Now the whole fish unfortunately does not have a lot going for it. It probably has some similarities to the Peeper, maybe giving you the idea that it is definitely from the same family, but besides that fact there is nothing to say, so no real lore it is. With the hoopfish, unfortunately the story is very much the same. The antennae around its body might have some interesting facts out there for you guys, but I don't think it's enough to warrant this category. Now the hoverfish is actually a bit different. You might think it fits very much into the same category, but in fact it actually displays a level of emotion and intelligence way higher than a lot of these creatures down there, which at the very least I think warrants the place in this rank. Now with the jelly ray, there really isn't much to say. It is a very cool looking creature, but no particularly interesting information out there about it. Now the shuttlebug, it falls into an interesting place because it does have a unique interaction with the environment, and it does populate a unique place in the game, but again, it doesn't really have any relevance to the story, which kind of makes me hard pressed between these 2 categories. But just because I'm feeling pretty generous and it does have some cool interactions with how it drills itself into the ground, I'm gonna put it right into the 1 or 2 cool facts level. Now unfortunately the lava zone version of the II will not really get the same treatment, as it is not just really interesting, and it will fall into the same category as its more shallow counterpart. Now the lava larva is definitely more interesting. This thing can attach itself to your vehicles and suck out the power. But what's more interesting, there has never been a confirmation of what the lava larva is actually evolving into, what it will grow up to be. And so for the time being, I think that warrants it just enough to put it into the some lore to be found category, but not much higher. Now the lava lizard, which was originally supposed to be the model for the Stalker, I think will follow very much in the same suit. It has very interesting interactions with the environment, how it can even coat itself in lava or like cooled off magma to basically protect itself from the high heat, and I think that's definitely enough to put itself into this category. The Boomerang, unfortunately, is just a different adaptation of the Boomerang, so it will go down here very quickly as well. But now we're on to the Mesmer, a fascinating creature, very unique, and even though it is not really relevant to the story, and due to how I wrote out these categories, it should most definitely be here. To be honest with you, I think just the fact that it is so cool and it can interact with, other creatures and the player in such an interesting way, it has to be at least up here. Now we're on to the Oculus. Now the Oculus itself is not actually as interesting as it might sound. Yes, it comes from the Peeper, which is a very interesting creature, but in and of itself, it doesn't really have that much to go for it, so I'm just gonna put it into the 1 or 2 cool facts category. Which of course brings us to the Peeper, the Omega of the Subnautica lore, and the most iconic creature in the game perhaps. I think just based on the fact that it is essentially responsible for keeping all of 4546B's world alive for the duration of Kara existing, it deserves to be in the S-rank category, and that's not even to mention that it was trained by the Sea Emperor itself to do this task. Now the Rapid Raid doesn't really have much going for it either. There are some interesting facts about it, but it really doesn't connect to the story in any fascinating way, and potentially it might have some connections to Below Zero, so maybe, just maybe, it can, just make it into this category. And now we're on to the Reaper Leviathan. Again, I think Leviathans are interesting by definition, but this thing has first potentially adapted to the radiation of the Aurora, maybe even thrives from it. Next, it might be responsible for the lives of several of the surviving crew members on board of the Aurora. And last, it is definitely connected to some of the other Leviathans coming from the Lost River, and I think that is easily enough to warrant a place in the top row. The same can unfortunately not be said about everyone's favorite ray from the lava zones. I don't think there's anything really particularly interesting about it, so it's gonna be in the no real lore category. Next up is the Reefback, everybody's favorite Leviathan. Well, these things are fascinating in several ways. First, how they basically mark all areas that are safe for the player. Second, how their body works, since we actually know very little about it. And next, how they can develop small biomes on their bodies. I think that is definitely enough to put them into the some lore to be found category. And now we're on to the Reginald. Now, with the Reginald, it unfortunately follows the suit of many other creatures, not really having anything interesting about it besides being probably distantly related to the Alpha Peeper, putting it into the no real lore category. Now the Rock Grub is actually a bit more interesting than a lot of the other creatures because of how small it is and what that allows it to do with the environment. In fact, it is the smallest creature in the game that we can actually see and scan. And due to the fact that its jaw allows it to eat small chunks of the coral and it has some interesting interactions with the environment, I think at least 1 or 2 cool facts for this creature. Now for the Sand Shark, that one is definitely more cool because again, it has interesting interactions with the environment, being able to dig itself into the sand and then surprise attack you, and its body composition definitely makes it somewhat closely related to research specimen Theta down in the Lost River, so it can definitely go into the middle category. Now next up, we're onto the Sea Dragon. I mean, this is very quickly and obviously put into top tier, not only because it is effectively responsible for Kara being released into the, well, whole planet 4546b, but also to a certain extent the demise of the precursors on the planet, and it is also one of the, if not the coolest sounding creature in the game, so definitely putting it up there. Now the Sea Emperor, I mean, do I even have to say anything about it? Probably the most important creature in the game, definitely top tier. Now when it comes to the Sea Treaders, they are somewhat interesting. They have the Sea Treader's Path, which is a unique biome just based on them, and they also are a very unique Leviathan, essentially walking instead of swimming, and also potentially being the smallest Leviathan creature out there. And I think even though they might not be super relevant to the story, I'm still gonna put them here because of how interesting they are. And next up is the Amp Eel. Now this creature is certainly cool looking, and it is definitely one of the more interesting aggressive fauna creatures to be found out there. Another interesting point about it is actually the interaction it might have with the crab squid, and because of all that, I think it definitely deserves to be in the middle category. Now for the Skyray, this is a tough one because yes, the creature is very unique in the fact that it is a bird, the only real flying creature in the game, besides the modded Gasopod in that one video. But other than that, it doesn't really have that much going for it, so it's gonna land in the 1 or 2 cool facts category. Now the Spadefish is one of the largest things you can actually eat in the game, and it definitely has some cool things going for it in terms of the appearance, but other than that, there's nothing to really say about it, so no real lore it is. Now the River Prowler is a bit of an interesting one because yes, it is somewhat related to the Ghost Leviathan, probably by appearance, and maybe to the other Leviathans as well, whilst at the same time looking like perhaps it could even be related to some of the rays. Unfortunately, other than that, it doesn't really have anything interesting going for it, so I'm gonna land it in the 1 or 2 cool facts category. Now the Stalker is definitely cool. Stalkers are cool by default by the fact that they pick up titanium parts and they can interact with them, but on top of that you can even tame them, and on top of that they are probably responsible for the lives of at least few lifepod survivors, which lands them in the interesting lore relevant to the story category. And finally the Warper, I think this is another S tier coming in for us pretty easily, as it is, number 1, not a creature from 4546V, it is actually a biomechanical thing that is made from both creatures from this planet and outside materials built by the precursors, and it can teleport things to you. There's just so many things about them, which I think easily lands them at the top. So guys, I think this is actually pretty solid. This is, of course, only my opinion on how the creatures from the world of 4546B in the base Subnautica should be ranked in terms of lore interest or importance. And if you guys have a different opinion, that's totally cool by me. If you'd like to share, please hit me up on Twitter or on Discord with your own tier lists. I would very much like to see them. But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of different video, and if you did, maybe consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. All of those would be very much appreciated. With that, I'm gonna see you all in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.